Okay, I came up with a topic called FTTx, Find the Technology X, and the FTTx, it's an acronym for Fiber to the Home, and the X basically for, yeah, home or curb or street, whatever you can imagine. And it came up during my daily work. What I'm basically doing is doing quite a lot of stuff with optical components, transceivers, and I'm quite often on site in the data centers and doing installations as well together with the customers. And that was basically a simple question like, hey Thomas, we run quite a lot of fiber optic cable now, but how can we actually reach our end customers, business customers, or even regular home users? And there is all kind of technology out there, but it's quite difficult for us to identify which is the one we want to use or which makes more sense. Isn't there a kind of an overview what we could use beside there are some acronyms like PON, Active Ethernet, etc., etc. And I said, hey, well, that's quite an interesting question. Why not do a comparison in terms of what can we bring on the fiber and how can we terminate it? And also in terms of which technologies are involved there. And that's the next 20 minutes to do a little bit of comparison of those technologies. The main idea of the presentation is if you have this rough picture in mind always. So we have our core network, it's simplified for sure. We got a feeder line to a distribution POP point, like for example a street cabinet or it can be everything, or a regular POP actually. And you got a distribution line to your customer premises. And that's the picture you should keep in mind for the next minutes. Now, as I mentioned already, the first technology is PON, and there is all kind of stuff there like GE PON, PON 10G PON. So what is the idea behind this? So the PON is basically standing for passive optical networking. What the idea behind of the passive is, I show on the next slide, but the first thing is here the 10 or the G or the E, and that's already well known. So that the 10 is standing for 10 gigabit, the G for gigabit, and the E, it's basically Ethernet. And you can mix them up in all kind of variations. For example, you can say 10 GE PON, which is 10 gigabit over Ethernet. You can also make 10 G PON, which would then be a TDM-based technology, which is known from ATM, for example. And that's basically it about this acronym. The most important or the most interesting part is now that the PON portion, and there are some, how to say, so some components which we haven't used that much when we're talking about Ethernet, and we have switches, regular switches, and we have a point-to-point link. Now in the PON world, the interesting part is inside our street cabinet. It's an optical splitter. What does an optical splitter does? From the idea, you get the light in and it splits it up in half. You can compare it like you take a water tap and you put a Y piece on there, and on both ends of the Y piece you install, for example, a washing machine and another washing machine. Why you would do that, I don't know, but maybe for redundancy or to have always one working machine. But the most important thing here is both washing machines will get only the half of the water. And that's the same happening in an optical splitter. So you split up the signal in half, and every time you split it, you have 3 dB loss, which means half the signal strength. Now, the good thing again is you can do this in cascades. And when you do this in cascades, you can do this up to 7 times, which is done in PON networks. You get up to 128 subscribers on one single fiber. On the other side, you have a loss in your network of 21 dB because you have to add all the loss for sure. Now, this is not a 21 dB loss. It seems much, but it's possible to transmit over a long distance. Now, thinking of the optics which are out on the market, when you have 21 dB of loss, plus a little bit of margin which you need for your fiber itself, because the signal is split out, you could come up to a reach of around 20 kilometers coming from your feeder line to your customers. Or yeah. Now, the interesting part of the PON as well, beside the splitter, is that we do have a shared media. So in terms of the downstream traffic coming from your core network to your customer, it's a shared media like wireless LAN. So every customer gets the entire signal or the entire payload actually from everybody. The upstream portion, that's dedicated for sure, but to have a access control on your media, you need somehow a layer 2 mechanism that it does a distribution, and that's done in your CPE. In the PON world, it's called the ONU, the Optical Network Unit, and it's a kind of a pair combination with the optical line termination in your core network, and they have to somehow negotiate how they distribute between different subscribers the traffic, especially the downstream traffic. Plus, they do encryption on that, because everybody or every subscriber could get the signal or the payload from the neighbor, from the downstream traffic, and I think you want to avoid that, and therefore you do have to do encryption. And that's also a big drawback. I mean, encryption is not a drawback, but the CPEs and the solutions of the OLTs and ONUs I have looked out there on the market, it's always a kind of a combination of a pair. So you can't, there might be solutions out there that you can buy the OLT from vendor 1 and you can buy the ONU from vendor 2, but they work not that much well together sometimes, or people are complaining about it doesn't work that well. So you're always tied to one vendor when it comes to your CPEs or in the combination with the OLT. And I think that's a major part you have to know when it comes to PON networks, that it's a shared media, and you have to take in consideration that you have to take care about it, basically. Now, when the vendor is PON for passive, we also have active, which is Aeon. And that's something, it's just I don't want to say a new word, but it's something we already do day by day when you run a point-to-point link in your network. And this picture should be quite familiar, because when you, for example, you have here your street cabinet and you place in there a layer 2 switch, you can reach all your customers directly connected, and you get an uplink link. That's basically the idea behind it. The good thing is, for sure, you can add more subscribers than on a single PON link, because the more switches you place in there, the more ports you have, for sure, more subscribers you can add. And the reach is up to 80 kilometers, for example. The distance I'm talking here, especially also in the PON world, or now the 80 kilometers here in the Aeon world, it's always focused on 10 gigabit. For sure, when you go down to 1 gigabit, it's there is a longer reach for that. And one drawback for the Aeon solution is that you need power inside of your street cabinet. And if you need power inside, you have to get the power outside again in terms of heating, or in terms of heat, because the switches make heat. This might, in some solutions, be a problem. Now, a variant of the Aeon solution, what I have seen also in the field out there, is the bidirectional attempt connecting the customers. So do it not with dual fiber, do it with one fiber. And you can also do it in the classical attempt, like I showed previously in the Aeon solution, with a central switch in your street cabinet, or you place the switch closer to your core, and you have to add up for sure the feeder lines to your street cabinet and patch all them through in the street cabinet. The good thing is you don't need any power here anymore, and the signal is going directly through. The big disadvantage is definitely you need more and more feeder lines to your street cabinet. and it depends on the scenario you're facing or which you have. This might be an issue that you don't have that much feeder lines. A good thing here is when you more centralize it to your core structure, and you have more switches inside there, you can run different applications, and you can serve one customer with 1 gig and the other customer with 10 gig because it's more you're way more flexible just because of the amount of switches you're running there. And that's basically it, actually, in terms of the technologies I have seen out there doing FTTx in terms of only directly fiber to your end customer. For sure, when there's copper involved as well, there is more than just the FTTx solutions. You can also, for sure, do something with XDSL later on then. But this presentation is more covering the entire path of fiber. Having the comparison now, the good thing about PON is, maybe we start down here, is you need a single feeder line. That's pretty cool, and that might be cheap. The bad thing is all your customers are rely on each other. So if you have one guy in your network who is playing a tricky game, or for example does boost light on its upstream, for example, this can influence all the other subscribers on your network as well, especially at one trunk or at one branch of your passive network, and that's something which could cause trouble. At the Aeon solution on the right side, the disadvantage here definitely is we need power, but the good thing is, when we look at the bidirectional, you can really support different customers with different applications. That's quite flexible. Also in the Aeon solution, the disadvantage is if one customer wants to have, for example, a higher bandwidth and you have deployed the switches in the street cabinets, it's more a bigger issue for you to raise the bandwidth for one single customer, and that's also more expensive. So it really depends on the scenario you're facing to, and especially how your feeder lines are looking, how many feeder lines you have, and that's something depends on the case later on. Now, when I had the first time that presentation, I came, how to say, the question was, I did this first time in Germany, and then later on from the audience, the question came, hey, how does this look in other countries? Is it the scenario we have here in Germany, does it also look like in Sweden or in UK? And then the idea came up, why not just do a small audience survey to ask you guys actually how you do it at the moment, to give a little bit an overview, or maybe to see if it's a regional thing, how people deploy their network, or if it's a national thing. For example, not a national, sorry, a European thing. Now, and therefore I have 3 simple questions, and I also showed the result from the other countries then later on. The first question basically is, and just raise your hand, that's it. Do you operate fiber? Only 1? 2? 3? Okay. The others don't operate any fiber? Fiber? Okay.
Ours is so good, they buy it all from us.
Okay. All right, but that's
so your marketing opportunities look limited.
Yeah, it looks like. So you have to answer all the questions. So how long are your fibers then? The longest one you have to.
Not anywhere near as long as what you're talking about.
Sorry?
Not anywhere near as long as you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah. Paul.
Hi.
That's right. I think the message you're saying is rather than doing a PON, do direct fiber,
yeah.
and I think a lot of people are looking at that. I saw Bezic in Israel; they're looking at that in quite a big way. Actually, the optics is a piss in the ocean in terms of the cost. It's getting fiber to the premise. It's the real killer. And the way that we're doing that will give us future opportunities to be able to do individual fibres. There's technology, so we actually have filters on our fibre, so we could add extra wavelengths actually relatively easy. We've deployed them today, and with the expectation that in the future we may need to uprate the speed. But you know, just getting fibre to most places is a huge challenge, and actually in the end of next month, OpenReach will launch fibre on demand. So if you want to pay for the build, they will bring it all the way to your fibre. But it's just fibre to every premise or to lots of premises is, you know, cost prohibitive. You know, people want to buy it, we're going to offer it, but it's, you know, you're looking at, you know, more than £1,000 to build it. On our own cabinet lines, between cabinets we use PON as well, but again we've got filters in place. We're looking at XG PON as probably the next stage. But again, we've got a lot of flexibility and what choices we can make. I think the other issue with what you're proposing is typically most fibres aren't actually in the cabinet. They're in a box next door to the cabinet or some distance from the cabinet, and actually getting power to do an active solution will be very challenging in my mind. So, and the space in cabinets is quite limited. You don't want to really bring fibre into the cabinet to then bring it all the way back out. You want to keep it actually in the road as much as you possibly can, or on a pole. So power, I think, for an active solution is going to be probably a relatively big challenge. In terms of line length, you know, from some of our nodes, probably on average it's 30 to 35 kilometres is probably the longest average. The kind of, we just don't see any issues with line length or with signal challenges right now. It's not a problem that's top of our mind. The big problem is how do we build as much of it as we can to as many locations as we can.
Okay, thank you very much, Neil. So the 35 kilometers, is it really coming from your distribution to your home customers?
No.
No. So, but how long are your lines then from the distribution to your home users?
No more than a kilometre typically.
Okay.
So we got cabinet, and if you go to somewhere like say a suburban part of London, in a 1 kilometre square, we'll maybe have 2, maybe 3 cabinets, because predominantly we're deploying VDSL, so fibre to the curb. But you know, if there is a long line length, then the optics on the end of it will not be the big swing of what happens in that. It's a tiny portion of the overall end-to-end cost.
Definitely. Yeah. We also got over one thing. But you said you don't have all the time power in your curbs. Is that right?
No, and so in our cabinets we have power.
Yes.
And where the actual optical NGA point is, where we do the fibre, there's no power in that.
Okay.
So that's where one of the challenges will be to do something active, because you'll need more power.
Right. Okay.
It's not to say that we couldn't turn the cabs into some sort of optical distribution point, but you know, taking fibre out of the ground into something to do something with it, to put it back in the ground, is painful. Yeah. Basically, and we don't want to do that if we can avoid it. And we see no real need to do it. Now, Will made a point about rural stuff. I think what you're doing here probably applies more in some of the rural locations where line length might be a much longer challenge. But even in that situation, it won't be a big concern for us. Again, the optics won't be the ultimate big part of the cost. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, for sure. We also got over there someone operating the fiber. Could you? One was raising his hand.
It's a different market. Sorry, it's a different market really. We don't really use. There's no really space for us to use PON. We use transmission equipment all the way.
Okay. All right. So. Here we go. In the other countries, it really looked like that most people had power in their in the cabinets as well. Yeah, but also they only said, okay, up to 5 kilometers we do have our distribution line. So here we had 1 kilometer. In Ireland it was up to 3 kilometers. So, but the longest one really went up to 5 kilometers. And I think that's a really critical number in terms of, it's what Neil also said. It's not a part of the optical components that this will be the limiting factor here. What I personally found very interesting was the attempt what people do at the moment. So PON itself was not that big deal in the European market. In the countries I was there, so people didn't install that much PON. So basically, they went to an active Ethernet solution, to an Aeon solution, and run straight bidirectional optics because this was the easiest and simplest way to get directly the light to their customers' premises. Yeah, that's basically the coverage about about this topic. And if you got some question, give it on. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Thomas? Okay, thank you very much.
Perfect.